Nothing helps a restless kid go to sleep better than a good story told to them by their parents. However, if parents told their children the original versions of these tales, their kids would probably never sleep again. Hi, I'm Oz, your local floor goblin here, ready to take your shins out with an aluminum bat and bring you to my level so I can regale you with interesting stories about children's tales and their lesser-known original renditions. Welcome back to Thinkology, everyone! Let's get right into it! Now, before we get to our first story, let's talk about where most of these classic fairy tales came from. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm were two German brothers born in the late 18th century. The two brothers began collecting folk tales and eventually published their first collection of 86 traditional stories, titled Children's and Household Tales. Now, as we're about to find out, this was basically just ye olde scary stories to tell in the dark before Disney got their grubby hands on it and made it, magical. So, anyways, over the next several decades, the brothers issued several new editions and included more stories they had collected. When the 7th edition was released in 1857, the volume had grown to a massive 210 fairy tales. These original fairy tales are much different from what most of us are used to. The characters in these stories are far more likely to end up maimed or murdered than live happily ever after. For example, let's take a look at the original version of Rapunzel. Now, we all know the gist of the story. Rapunzel's a beautiful woman with long hair who has been locked in a tower by an evil witch. Eventually, she's saved by a Prince Charming type guy and everything's sunshine and rainbows. Or they get hit with a frying pan. It's a perfectly decent fairy tale and all, but not quite what the Grimm brothers originally wrote. Now, while the original Rapunzel isn't quite as horrifying as some of the other stories we're going to discuss, it's still pretty disturbing. In the version told in Children's and Household Tales, Rapunzel accidentally tells the witch that she's pregnant. The witch then cuts off Rapunzel's hair and tosses her into the wilderness. Later that night, the prince returns to the tower and climbs up Rapunzel's severed hair, only to discover that the witch had tricked him and Rapunzel was gone. When the prince enters the tower and sees the witch, she curses him by saying, "You have come for Mistress Darling, but that beautiful bird is no longer sitting in her nest, nor is she singing anymore. The cat got her, and will scratch your eyes out as well. You have lost Rapunzel. You will never see her again." So the prince immediately jumps out the tower and is only saved from death because a thorn bush broke his fall. Ouch. Now, in a Disney movie, the prince would likely chase after Rapunzel and they would escape together after some casualties from a frying pan. This also happens in the original, but there are a few extra violent steps to the story. In the Grimm version, the prince is blinded after Holy fuck. The prince is blinded after being stabbed in the eyes by the thorn bush. With no way of finding his lost love, he wanders aimlessly through the countryside for years. One day he comes across a forest and hears Rapunzel singing. Led by her voice, the prince finds her and their twin children. After being reunited, Rapunzel's tears restore the prince's sight, and they live happily ever after. So, all things considered, this one is pretty tame, besides the whole blinded by thorns fiasco. There really isn't that big of a difference in the Grimm version and the more kid-friendly edition that most of us know. But don't worry, the next story will make you invest in more nightlights. Cinderella. It's one of the oldest and most popular fairy tales in the world, with thousands of renditions and versions existing, with some of them dating back as far as the 5th century, although probably one of the most famous versions of the story was written in 1697. And today, we're going to talk about the 1819 edition published by the Grimm brothers. Now, like other folktales recorded by the Grimm brothers, their telling of Cinderella ramps up the violence and depravity until the story resembles a horror movie script. So, how exactly does this version differ from the one most of us know? Well, the story's almost the same, but the devil is in the details. Cinderella by the Grimm brothers follows the basic plot points we're all familiar with. Although, one of the bigger differences is the lack of a fairy godmother. Instead, Cinderella gets help from a white bird that appears when she prays. Another detail is that in this version, her slipper is made of gold instead of glass. But beyond that, the story progresses much like the Disney version. Now, what really separates the Grimm's tale from the others is what happens at the end. After Cinderella loses one of her slippers and the prince declares that he'll marry whoever it fits, Cinderella's stepsisters mutilate their own feet so they can wear it. When the older stepsister can't fit her foot into the slipper, her mom hands her a knife and says, "Cut the toe off, for when you are queen, you will never have to go on foot." So the girl cut her toe off, squeezed her foot in the shoe, concealed the pain, and went down to the prince. Yeah. So the older one cuts off her toe and the younger one slices off part of her heel. Somehow the prince doesn't notice their bloody stumps oozing all over the place, but luckily for Cinderella, 2 doves from heaven tell the prince the stepsisters are tricking him by saying, "There they go, there they go. There's blood on her shoe. The shoe is too small. Not the right bride at all." Now, finally, the prince asks Cinderella to try on the slipper, which, to be honest, is pretty gross when you think about it. I mean, 2 different lunatics just bled all over the thing, and, when the slipper fits her foot perfectly, Cinderella's stepmom and sisters try to kill her, but the prince whisks her away on his horse. So everything turned out fine in the end, right? Not so fast. The Grimm brothers added an additional ending in their 1819 edition that really sets it apart from the other versions. In this added storyline, Cinderella pulls the power move and asks her stepsisters to be her bridesmaid for her wedding to the prince. However, while they were walking her down the aisle, the heavenly doves dive down and peck their eyes out of their skulls. The tale ends with the line, "And so they were condemned to go blind for the rest of their days because of their wickedness and falsehood." Now, there's a pretty good reason Disney decided to diverge from this version a little bit. I can't think of many G-rated movies that feature self-mutilation and eyeball plucking. In fact, I can't really think of any. So, say what you will about the violence depicted in the Grimm version, at the end of the day, they really knew how to drive the point home. It's kinda hard to miss the moral of the story when the antagonists get their eyes removed by birds for being mean. Now, while we're going after what can only be considered as Disney's intellectual property, Cinderella has a pretty messed up ending, but it's nothing compared to the Grimm's version of Snow White. Snow White is one of the most popular fairy tales in the world. It's been adapted into plays, cartoons, movies, and more, and sold to Disney, but here's the thing. None of them even come close to being as gruesome as the original folk tale. Before we jump into what makes the original story so disturbing, let's talk about the most popular version first, Disney's 1937 animated Snow White. This is probably by far one of the most well-known editions. After adjusting for inflation, it has grossed over $1 billion worldwide, and Walt Disney was even given an honorary Oscar for the film. Disney's version is so influential that the US Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry. In the Disney version of the story, Snow White is a little girl with an evil stepmother, the Queen. As Snow White grows up, the Queen's magical mirror tells her that Snow White is now the fairest one of all. Enraged that Snow White is more beautiful than her, the Queen orders huntsmen to kill her and bring back her heart. The huntsman takes Snow White to the woods but is unable to murder her, so instead, he warns Snow White that the Queen is trying to kill her and tells her to run away. Snow White then begins to wander into the wilderness and eventually meets the 7 dwarves, who let her stay in their cottage in return for her cooking and cleaning. Later on, the magic mirror reveals to the Queen that Snow White is still alive, and in order to kill her once and for all, the Queen creates a poison apple and tricks Snow White into eating it. The dwarves then return home and chase after the Queen. She tries to kill them, but lightning strikes the cliff she's standing on, causing her to fall to her death. After the Queen's death, the dwarves put Snow White's body in a glass coffin on display in the wilderness. A year after she died, a prince finds Snow White and kisses her, breaking the Queen's spell. They all lived happily ever after in the end. Yeah. Disney's Snow White is popular for a reason. It's a well-made movie that can appeal to basically any audience, but here's the thing though, if Walt Disney tried to adapt the Grimm's version of the story, no one would have ever let him make another movie, and here's why. For starters, in the Grimm's version of Snow White, the Queen doesn't just want the huntsman to take her heart. Instead, she tells him, "Take Snow White out into the woods. I never want to see her again. Kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and her liver back to me." So, instead of killing Snow White, the huntsman kills a boar and brings the lungs and liver back to the Queen. After having the organs boiled with salt, the queen eats them, believing that she was eating Snow White. Right off the bat, this is a bit more metal. It's not every day that you see cannibalism in a children's story. Like in the Disney movie, Snow White starts living with the 7 dwarves in the woods, and the magic mirror tells the queen that she's still alive. The queen then disguises herself as a bodice peddler and visits Snow White. After convincing Snow White to let her in, the queen wraps a bodice around her and ties it so tightly that it suffocates her. Later that night, the dwarves find Snow White laying on the ground and not moving. They discover the strangling bodice and cut it in half, allowing Snow White to breathe again and come back to life. When this murder attempt doesn't work, the queen concocts another scheme, saying, "This time, I shall think of something that will destroy you." So she poisons a comb and tricks Snow White into using it. As soon as the comb touches her hair, Snow White falls to the ground unconscious, and the original story reads, "You specimen of beauty," said the wicked woman, "now you are finished." And she walked away. Once again, the dwarves come home and find her passed on the ground. They then find the poison comb stuck in her hair and pull it out, instantly reviving Snow White. That's a pretty shitty poison comb. By this point, you would think that Snow White would know better than to trust strangers, but she ends up being tricked by the queen a third time! Like in the movie, the queen creates a poison apple and tricks Snow White into eating it, who dies after taking one bite. In true evil witch fashion, the queen laughs at Snow White's lifeless body and declares, "White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood. This time the dwarves cannot awaken you." Later the same night after Snow White is poisoned, the dwarves once again come back and find her dead. They try to revive her by washing her with water and wine, but nothing works and Snow White is still dead. The dwarves mourn Snow White's death, but after 3 days her body still looks as fresh as a living person. So, just like in the movie, the dwarves decide to put her in a glass coffin and put her on display instead of burying her. Now, some intermediate amount of time later, a prince stumbles upon the dwarf's house, and after seeing Snow White in her coffin, he tries to buy it from the dwarves, who thankfully refuse with, "We will not sell it for all the gold in the world." The prince persists by saying, "Then give it to me, for I cannot live without being able to see Snow White. I will honor her and respect her as my most cherished one." So, okay, just to clarify something real quick, this prince has never seen Snow White before in his life, and he falls in love with her corpse instantly and wants to buy it from the dwarves. My guy's a cold packer. Disney obviously steered away from this necrophilic angle found in the Grimm brothers original, but regardless, the dwarves do end up giving Snow White's dead body to the prince. Great, what could possibly go wrong with giving a... whatever. After the dwarves give the prince his dead person, he tells the servants to carry her in the coffin away. When one of them stumbles on a bush, he shakes the coffin and dislodges the poison apple from Snow White's throat. Snow White's eyes then open, and she comes back to life, asking, "Good heavens, where am I?" Anyways, to answer her question, the prince goes into a tirade about how much he loves her and asks Snow White to marry him. Obviously, she agrees on the spot to spend the rest of her life with this goddamn necrophile. Even with him being short 4 quarters to $1 in the head, Snow White and the prince are planning their wedding and decided to invite the queen. Now, unlike the weddings we see in Disney movies, this one doesn't have any talking animals, catchy musical numbers, but instead, Grimm Snow White goes for more of Game of Thrones Red Wedding vibe, but with 100% more horrific torture. When the queen arrives at the wedding venue, she is paralyzed with fear and can't move. While she stands there completely immobile, a pair of iron shoes are put into burning coals until they burn red hot. Then, they force the burning shoes onto the queen's feet and make her dance until she falls down dead. Jesus fucking Christ. So yeah, pretty much the same as the Disney movie, right? Now, this next folktale is a little less well known than the others, and probably for good reason. Rumplestiltskin, also known as one of the worst Shrek villains, is another story published by the Grimm brothers in their collection. Like a lot of fairy tales, this one is fairly short. Don't worry though, this one still manages to pack a whole lot of disturbing stuff into just a couple pages. Rumplestiltskin is a story about the daughter of a miller who is forced into slavery for the king. The tale starts off with the miller bragging to the king that his daughter can spin straw into gold. Wanting to test his claim for himself, the king locks the daughter inside of a room full of straw and tells her to spin it into gold by the next morning or she'll be killed. The nameless daughter has no idea how to accomplish the impossible task, and she breaks down into tears. Following these tears, an imp enters the room and asks the girl, "Why are you crying?" The daughter explains the situation to the imp, who asks her, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" She tells him that if he spins the straw into gold, that he can have her necklace. When the king returns in the morning, he's amazed to find the daughter actually turned straw into gold. But one room full of gold isn't enough for him, so he takes the daughter to a large room full of straw and demands the same thing. That night, the imp appears again, and the daughter trades her ring in exchange for him spinning the straw into gold once more. And again, the king returns the next morning to find a room stuffed with gold. But it's still not enough. This time, he takes the daughter to an even bigger room full of straw and tells her, "Tonight, you must spin this too. If you succeed, you shall become my wife." That's right! The enslaved daughter's reward for turning straw into gold is getting to marry the evil king who enslaved her. Keep in mind that her two options now are either A, spin the straw into gold and marry a psychopath, or B, don't spin the straw into gold and die. Later that night, the imp returns for a third time, and the original story reads, "When the girl was alone, the little man returned for a third time. He said, 'What will you give me if I spin the straw this time?' 'I have nothing more that I can give you,' answered the girl. 'Then promise me, after you are queen, your first child.' 'Who knows what will happen?' thought the miller's daughter, and not knowing what else to do, she promised the little man what he demanded. In return, the little man once again spun the straw into gold. For the third time, the imp makes good on his part of the deal and spins all the straw into gold. In the morning after, the king comes in and declares that he'll marry the miller's daughter. Now, a year later, the daughter and the king are married and she has a baby. Suddenly, the imp appears again and demands that she gives him her child. The queen offers him all the gold in the kingdom, but the imp tells her the only way out of the deal is if she can guess his name within the next 3 days. Over the next 2 days, the queen recites every name she can remember to the imp. She sends messengers out to help with the search, but they still can't guess his name. Now, finally, on the third day, a messenger comes back to the queen and tells her about a strange man he saw talking to himself. According to him, the man was jumping around a fire saying, "Today I'll bake, tomorrow I'll brew, then I'll fetch the queen's new child. It is good that no one knows Rumplestiltskin is my name." Now, brace yourself for this next part, because it's about to get weird. When the imp comes back later that day, the queen asks him if his name is Rumplestiltskin. After hearing his true name, Rumplestiltskin freaks out and screams, "The devil told you that! The devil told you that!" Then he stomps his right foot so hard into the ground that he is buried up to his waist. Rumplestiltskin then grabs his left leg with both hands and rips himself in half. That's how the story ends! The queen keeps her baby and is now free to live her life married to a greedy evil king who threatened to murder her 3 different times. I can't even fathom what the moral of the story is supposed to be. Maybe it's, if you work hard and make deals with strange imps, your future husband won't have you executed. Or maybe just don't lie about your daughter's ability to turn straw into gold. My God. Regardless, whoever thought this was a good children's story probably shouldn't have kids. Here's a story I wasn't aware of until I actually started looking into these Grimm adventures. Anthropomorphic animals and objects are a staple of children's stories. From the 3 Blind Mice to Beauty and the Beast, these 2 things are everywhere in the world of fairy tales. This next story is a bit different than most though. The mouse, the bird, and the sausage. This is yet another depraved and twisted story included in the Grimm's collection. In this story, a mouse, bird, and sausage all live together. The 3 of them all have specific tasks they need to do every day. The bird fetches wood, the mouse carries water, makes the fire, and sets the table. The sausage does all the cooking. Everything was going well for the 3 of them, and life was good. One day, the bird is talking to another bird in the woods. The second bird tells the first that he's working too hard and that the mouse and sausage have it way easier than him. So the bird decides that his friend is right and decides not to fetch the wood the next day. He tells the mouse and sausage that he's tired of being their servant and that they all should switch up their tasks. The mouse and sausage weren't on board with this plan at first, but eventually they relent. Now the sausage has to get the wood, the mouse has to cook, and the bird carries water. I mean, oh well, it can't be that big of a deal. It's not like this one decision will lead to all of them brutally dying or anything, right? Right? What could go wrong with sending a sausage to get wood? Anyways, the sausage goes out into the forest for wood and never returns. Of course. Worried, the bird flies out to find it and discovers that a dog has attacked the sausage. The bird confronts the dog, but the dog lies and says the sausage was carrying forged letters and has to die. After abandoning the sausage for death, the bird returns home and fills the mouse in on what happened. Both of them are sad, but they decide to stick together. Here's what happens next according to the original story. The bird set the table while the mouse prepared the food. She jumped into the pot as a sausage had always done, in order to slither and weave in and out of the vegetables and grease them. But before she reached the middle, her hair and skin were scalded off, and then she perished. That's right, the mouse jumps into a boiling pot and dies after her skin burns off. After seeing his last friend die a horrible death, the bird starts angrily throwing wood around the house. The wood then catches on fire and lights up the whole house. Desperate to save his home, the bird goes to fetch water, but the bucket in the well falls on top of him and he drowns. So, moral of the story is pretty simple. Don't ever try anything new because you and your friends will die horrifically. Most of these terrifying children's stories only have like one scene featuring death. The mouse, the bird, and the sausage just kinda goes all out and murders all three main characters in record time. Kill your main character's speedrun any percent. And now for the final one we're gonna talk about. Cat and mouse in partnership. Oh look! Another fairy tale about animals being friends. Surely nothing will go horribly wrong in this one. Anyways, this one is a story about a cat and a mouse who become friends and decide to live together. The two of them are aware that they won't survive the winter if they don't stock up on provisions, so they buy a pot of fat and store it underneath the church altar. Not long after hiding the pot of fat, the cat gets hungry and wants to eat some of it. He tells the mouse that his cousin had a baby and wants him to be a godfather. The mouse believes the lie, and the cat goes to the church, leaving the mouse behind. After visiting the church and eating the top layer of fat from the hidden pot, the cat returns home and the mouse asks, "What name do they give the child?" And the cat replies, "Top Off." The mouse thinks the name is a little weird, but she still believes the cat. Sometime later, the cat decides to go back and eat more of the fat. He tells the mouse, "You must do me a favor, and once more manage the house alone for a day. I have been asked again to be the godfather." Once again, the mouse is cool with it and, lets the cat go to the church alone. This time, the cat eats half of the pot of fat and remarks, "Nothing tastes as good as that which one eats by oneself." Like the first time, the mouse asks the cat what they named the kid. "Half gone," the cat tells her. Somehow this lie works again, and the mouse believes him. Soon afterwards, the cat wants even more fat from the pot, so he tricks the mouse again. "All good things come in threes," he said to the mouse. "I have been asked to be godfather again. The child is totally black, only it has white paws. Otherwise, it has not a single white hair on its whole body. This only happens once every few years. You will let me go, won't you?" "Top off, half gone," answered the mouse. "They are such odd names that they make me stop and think." "Here you sit at home," said the cat, "with your dark gray fur coat and long braid of hair capturing fantasies. That is because you do not go out in the daytime." After this fight, the cat goes to the church and he eats the rest of the fat. When he gets back home, the mouse instantly confronts him. The mouse immediately asks what the name had been given to the third child. "You will not like it either," said the cat. "His name is All Gone." "All Gone?" cried the mouse. "That is the most worrisome name of all. I have never seen it in print. All Gone? What can that mean?" And she shook her head, curled herself up, and lay down to sleep. Eventually, winter arrives and food becomes scarce. The mouse remembers the hidden pot of fat and tells the cat, "Come, cat, we will go to our pot of fat which we have stored up for ourselves. It'll taste good now." So, the two of them go to church to get their fat. However, When the mouse discovers that the pot is empty, she says, "Now I see what has happened. Now it comes to light. You are a true fiend. You ate everything when you were serving as a godfather. First top off, then half gone, then..." The cat warns the mouse. "One more word and I will eat you too." However, the mouse had already begun saying all gone, so the cat pounces on her and eats the mouse alive. The end! Another heartwarming tale that's perfect for putting the kids to bed. You plan on buying this book for your own children, you should probably go ahead and set aside a therapy budget as well. Anyways, well, that's all the terrifying children's stories for today. Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe, and all that jazz. Maybe next time if you subscribe, I won't hit you in the shins with an aluminum bat. Anyways, ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on our newest content. This has been Oz, and I'll see you all next time.